do you think things will get in the next 18 to 24 months, not on Wall Street, but on Main Street?
I wouldn't, it would be totally contrary to my theory to make a prediction, because that will entirely depend on how we react to what's happening. In other words, the future will be determined by future actions, and particularly by the next president, I would say. And I can see two totally different paths, depending who is the president, among other things. But that's not the only. In other words, the range of possibilities right now is very wide. So you certainly cannot avoid a serious downturn over the next 18 months, let's say. But whether it's going to be something like what we had in Japan, 10 years, or whether you will have actually a collapse of the entire world economy, depends on how people react to it. Now, I think we've learned something from the 30s. We are not going to let the system collapse. So we are not going to have a replay of the 30s. I think we have to deal with the housing problem, the danger that housing prices will overshoot on the downside as they did on the upside. It's an unsolved problem. And then there is this question of international cooperation to prevent the crisis at the center to destroy the economies at the periphery. Those are the two unresolved problems. How we resolve them will tell us.
You know, Nouriel, you talk to anybody in business, they're thinking that the end of the fourth quarter will be terrible. They're thinking that the first quarter of next year will be even worse. You've said that you think that unemployment in this country, currently running about 6.1%, could hit 9%. What do you foresee? I mean, George says you can't predict the future because you have to look at where we're going in terms of every reaction to it. But you seem to have a pretty good eye for prognostication. Where do you see this going?
I certainly agree with George that how deep the recession is going to be depends in part on our policy response. Certainly right now we have made sure there is a backstop of the financial system, but there is much more needs to be done. You know, right now we're in a situation in which consumption is 70% of demand was already in free fall before the latest shocks. Now number came out in September saying there was a really in free fall. If you are a firm and you decide whether to do any capex spending for next year, given the uncertainty, leaving aside even the credit crunch, you're going to stop investing. And therefore, I think that there's going to be a fear of a self-fulfilling recession becomes deeper because consumers don't spend and the firms are not doing capital spending. And if the private sector is not going to spend enough consumption investment, we need the government spending. That's why I think it's going to be important to have a second fiscal stimulus package, investing in infrastructures, into maybe new technology, alternative energy, giving money to the state and local government that are strapped, increasing unemployment benefits and things of that sort that are going to boost demand. Otherwise, we might be in a situation which we think we're fixing the financial system, but if the economy is going to end up into a free fall 6 months from now, the collateral damage to the financial system is going to be huge because collapse, delinquencies, defaults are going to rise, and therefore the fall of Main Street is going to feed back to the Wall Street. So I think the policy response is crucial, and in this context, in addition to fiscal policy, I think you have to have also over time a reduction of that burden of the household sector. You have some fraction of the household sector that is credit cards, auto loans, student loans, mortgage debt is not sustainable. When a country has too much debt, they default, say Russia, Argentina, Ecuador, they reduce the debt value and then they start growing again. Where a corporation has too much debt, you go into Chapter 11, you reduce the debt level, you start spending, hiring, and producing again. Same thing is happening right now with the household sector. There is a debt overhang, and that's the reason why consumers cannot spend, because they don't have money to spend. They're cutting back on consumption. I think the key element of the policy response is going to be, over time, a significant reduction of that burden of the housing sector.
Jeff, George mentioned a moment ago, and he has written extensively on this, the importance of making sure that the housing bubble does not overshoot on the downside the way it overshot on the upside. How important is it, both economically and from a societal perspective as well, to slow down the rate of foreclosures? I mean, so many people are losing their homes these days.
I think that all of these things are important, but I also do not believe that we should do everything desperately that we can to try to stop a recession. I think that that idea is a little bit what has gotten us into this crisis in the first